I'm Nolan Harper, 35, no college diploma, no fancy plaques on the wall, just a GED, a decade of self-taught coding, and an empty diploma frame gathering dust in my garage. For 3 years, I paid my parents $1,200 a month rent, utilities, groceries, lawn service, everything. They lived under my roof, drove my cars, raided my pantry, yet not once said thank you. At every family gathering, I was the punchline, the dumb one who couldn't even pass high school algebra. That evening, I sat on my downtown loft's couch, the one with the skyline view, when a notification blinked on my phone. My sister Lydia had posted in the family chat, "What a blessing to have the dependable brother who handles all our bills again. Must be nice being our personal bank." That passive-aggressive jab was nothing new, but it was the tipping point. I poured a black coffee, then drove to the Victorian my parents called home, a house I bought 5 years ago with my first big contract bonus. It had marble countertops, custom cabinets, that absurd wine cooler my mother insisted on. I paid every mortgage payment, covered every repair, but I never even had an extra key. I arrived just before dinner. My father, 58, scrolled on his phone at the table. My mother, 57, perched at the head, lamenting her non-existent career. Lydia, 32, sulked beside her still unemployed, still superior. I set a gap of silence thicker than gravy. We ate grilled salmon. I'd brought skin, crispy flesh, medium rare. My mom praised the presentation, then complained it wasn't her recipe. Dad nodded, muttered something about stocks, and Lydia didn't look up from her screen. Dessert was a store-bought cheesecake I slipped in because Mom forgot to bake. Halfway through, Dad plucked at his slice and said loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "Funny how you can handle all these bills without a degree. Must have missed the day they taught basic math in school, huh?" Time froze. Lydia giggled. Mom sipped her wine as if she'd paused live TV. I stared at the fork in my hand, its tines sinking into the soft cream. All my years of midnight coding sessions, second jobs, investments, they collapsed into that single line. My heart thundered. I did nothing at first. I let the silence swell, let the lights hum, let the distant cars pass unheard. Then I stood, cleaned my plate without a word, carried it to the sink, washed it, dried my hands. I grabbed my jacket keys and said goodnight. In my car, engine off, I felt an icy calm settle in. This wasn't a mistake or a bad joke. It was my family's pattern: take, belittle, repeat. I opened my phone's apps one by one. Instacart gone. Netflix gone. Automatic transfers for rent, phone, utilities erased with a tap. I didn't message them. I didn't call. I simply ended the auto-pays and set their end dates. Next, I disabled the shared photo drive I'd created for Mom, her vacations, birthdays, my childhood memories, all locked behind a new password she didn't know. Then I revoked the power of attorney I'd signed during Dad's heart scare 2 years ago. Tax filings, bank sign-offs, his loan consolidations, they were no longer my burden. I felt light. Each click removed another chain. I didn't rush to finish. I didn't gloat, I simply reclaimed my boundaries. They'd offered me the role of invisible servicer, never a son. Now they'd learn what it's like to scramble for groceries when the card declines, to sweat through a cold shower when the water shuts off, to watch the lights flicker off during game night. Wednesday morning, my phone buzzed with dozens of missed messages. What happened? Did I do something wrong? Call me, please. I ignored them. Instead, I drafted an email to my lawyer, Regina, the woman who helped me incorporate my business on a shoestring budget. Regina doesn't blink at "I want to unwind my family support" quietly. She laughed and asked, "You sure you want to do this?" Yes, I told her, clean and quiet. Over the next week, we separated the cell plan, split the utilities, ended the shared insurance policy, and removed my name from every lease, every subscription, every profile. I left a 30-day notice on the property tax account, their responsibility onward. No dramatic letters, no angry phone calls, just silence and steel. I closed the door on my old life piece by piece. And for the first time since I was a kid hiding in my closet to avoid their eyes, I felt free. And that was enough. Wednesday afternoon, I sat at my standing desk in my loft, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. The silence was deafening. No pings of incoming payments, no group chat notifications teasing me, no frantic voicemails. For years, I'd believed that peace meant doing everything for them, but this felt different. It felt like space, like oxygen. My inbox held only one message from Regina. Your notices go live at midnight. Tomorrow, the fallout begins. I felt no dread, only the calm certainty that I had done what I needed to do. That evening, Lydia texted seriously. Nolan, are you okay? You ghosted us. I didn't reply. A few hours later, Dad called from an unrecognized number. I let it ring. Mom left 2 voicemails back to back. First, panicked, I don't understand. You can't stop paying the mortgage. Second, pleading. Call me darling, please. I closed my eyes and pictured the last time she'd called me darling when she'd pretended to care. I deleted both messages without listening. By day 2, the automatic grocery order failed. They discovered it when the delivery driver showed up empty-handed, checked their account, and left. Mom called the store manager demanding explanations. The manager called Regina, who directed all inquiries to me. Dad stomped into his office, my old bedroom repurposed into his den, and found the phone line dead. Who does this? He roared at no one in particular. Lydia tried to placate him. Maybe it's a glitch, she suggested, scrolling on her phone for excuses. She shot me a desperate text. MG, this is so embarrassing. Talk to me. I stared at it, my stomach settling into an odd mix of satisfaction and pity. On day 3, their cable and internet cut out during Dad's primetime news, and he glared at the blank screen like I'd turned it off manually. Mom rushed from the living room, clutching her wine glass, tears in her eyes. Why would you do this? She asked, voice trembling. I stood at the threshold, arms folded. I didn't do it, I said evenly. I just stopped. She recoiled as if struck. We thought she began, then stopped, the words dying on her lips. Lydia hovered behind her face, flushed. I didn't soften. I couldn't. They'd had years to appreciate me. Now they'd have to figure it out on their own. That night, I met with Regina again. Over coffee at our favorite cafe, I watched a barista sculpt a rosette atop a latte and felt a peaceful distance from my old life. Regina slid a file across the table. Your certified mail goes out tomorrow, eviction notices and utility transfers. I've drafted a concise letter. Effective 30 days from receipt, all financial obligations and property responsibilities revert solely to the recipients. She looked at me, eyebrows raised. Are you sure you want to proceed? I nodded. They mocked me at dinner. They silenced me for years. This is overdue. We shook on it, and I felt a twinge of finality, like turning the last page of a long, tragic chapter. Back home, I opened my laptop and stared at the virtual ruins of what had once been immaculate auto-pays and cloud-shared memories. A single email arrived from an unknown address. My father's poker buddy, Mike, heard you cut the lines. If you ever want to talk business or settle up, hit me back. I didn't reply. He was complicit in the guest house he'd secretly rented for extra income, the same guest house I'd renovated at my expense. My inbox remained empty except for one new newsletter subscription, a weekly coding digest I'd signed up for during my first all-nighters. That small gesture felt like reclaiming joy. On day 4, a certified letter slip appeared in our family's mailbox. It didn't include my name, instead it was addressed to resident at 214 Maple Street. Mom marched into the kitchen, bright fluorescent mail in hand, scanning the line, notice of property tax transfer. She tore it open, eyes widening at effective July 15th. All property tax liabilities under Social Security number XXXXXXE are hereby reassigned. Dad lurched in behind her. Lydia peered over their shoulders. The room smelled like old carpets and broken promises. Mom gasped. This is a mistake, she cried. Dad snatched the letter. I'll call the county, he declared, but his voice lacked conviction. He turned to me expectant, as if I would miraculously explain it away. I met his gaze coldly and walked past them into the night, mute and unflinching. The next morning, I found a text from Lydia. "You have to fix this. I'm begging you." And below it, another. "I love you, brother." I didn't respond. Instead, I headed to my gym, lifted weights until my arms shook, then squeezed the stress ball on the bench press machine until it clicked. Afterward, I showered and returned to my desk where a stack of design mock-ups awaited client review. My focus shifted back to my own world, my business, my clients, my projects. I clicked through code like a surgeon, each line healing a part of me that had always been wounded by their contempt. Saturday afternoon, I heard a knock at my front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw Lydia's silhouette, hair tied back, eyes red-rimmed. I cracked the door. She tried to push past me. "Please," she whispered. "They're panicking. Dad got a call from the bank. They claim the property's delinquent. They sent someone over this morning." Her voice cracked. "This is real, Nolan. We don't know what to do." I closed the door gently in her face. She pounded left 4 desperate knocks, then quieted. From behind the door, I heard her sob. The moment felt oddly sacred. I didn't answer, but I stayed listening until her muffled footsteps faded. That night, I replayed the events in my head. I imagined the shock in their living room as the inspector from the county records office compared deeds. I pictured Mom trying to log into the photo cloud only to find it locked. I imagined Dad fumbling through phone menus, dialing overdraft lines, and Lydia face pressed to the glass of my locked door, tears streaming, because she finally realized her big brother wasn't her bank account. It wasn't cruelty, I told myself. It was corrective. They needed to understand respect isn't free, it's earned. As I lay in bed, the city lights blinking like distant stars, I felt something stir, a quiet relief mingled with anticipation. Tomorrow, Regina would confirm the eviction notices had been delivered. Then the real reckoning would begin. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in my life felt like I was writing my own story, not theirs. And I knew that in this next chapter, I would finally find the peace I'd been chasing all these years. Day 6 arrived with a storm of silence. I woke to an empty inbox, no frantic pleas, no guilt trips disguised as family check-ins. The eviction notices were delivered overnight. Regina confirmed receipt before dawn. I felt no triumph, only a solemn resolve that boundaries are built on consequences, not good intentions. Corners of my mind buzzed with memories, Mom fussing over my grilled cheese lunches, Dad ridiculing my GED on my 16th birthday, Lydia bragging about her university dean's list while I balanced spreadsheets at midnight. Those ghosts flickered and faded as I stood dressed in jeans and a crisp white shirt ready for the day's work. I drove past 214 Maple Street before sunrise, the Victorian's turret caught in the dawn light. The lawn was overgrown, yellow dandelions poking through cracked pavers, landscaping abandoned. Curtains hung unevenly in dusty windows. I felt a pang not of regret, but of recognition this was the price of invisibility. They'd mistaken my patience for weakness. I'd mistaken their acceptance for respect. I imagined them inside, scrambling to call contractors, dragging dusty tools out of garages, trying to patch the holes they never noticed. Each nail they pounded, each plant they watered, would remind them of the hand that had built the place, the hand they'd ignored until it tightened its grip. That afternoon, I received a text from Lydia. "We can talk. I'll meet you at 5. We had agreed on a neutral ground Greenway cafe, the one with the ivy-covered facade and quiet back tables. At 5:02, I slipped into a booth, ordered black coffee, and watched the door. Lydia arrived with her shoulders hunched, her eyes red but resolute. She slid into the seat, clutching a manila envelope that rattled with paper. She opened it with a trembling finger, bank statements, utility bills marked past due, and eviction summary from the county court. "They didn't know what hit them," she whispered. "Mom's crying. Dad's in denial. They say you ambushed them." I studied her face and saw relief under the fear she'd needed someone else to admit it first. "I didn't ambush them," I said. "I gave them time." She looked away, tears threatening again, and I softened. "I'm sorry you have to watch this," I added. "I don't hate them. I just needed peace." On day 8, the first knock came at my door. I opened it to find Marcus, the county inspector I'd arranged. He wore a navy blazer, pressed slacks, and held a clipboard bristling with notes. "Mr. Harper?" he asked. I nodded and stepped aside. He'd come to verify occupancy and code compliance before enforcement. Together, we walked through the room's cracked grout in the bathroom, an unreported patio awning that violated setback rules, a smoke alarm, missing battery. He snapped photos, his voice clipped and professional. Lydia peeked from the porch, blending embarrassment and anger. Marcus paused at her glance, then carried on. When he left, I closed the door and locked it, feeling like a gatekeeper between two worlds, the one I'd supported and the one I was forging. That night, I lay in bed replaying Marcus's visit. I realized I'd intentionally created discomfort, not to punish them, but to force them to notice me, to remember I existed beyond a monthly deposit. Respect isn't born from convenience. It's earned through recognition of humanity. My chest tightened as I recalled the years I'd swallowed insults and bank balances alike, believing love should be unconditional. But unconditional giving had become a leash. I drifted into sleep with a vision of change rising like a tide. Day 10 brought a surprise, a formal apology letter from my father, typewritten uncharacteristic in his world of gruff emails. He wrote, "I misjudged your intentions and undermined your efforts. I apologize for the pain I caused and acknowledge the sacrifices you've made. Please accept this as a first step toward rebuilding trust. No promises, no excuses, just admission." I read it twice, feeling its weight in my hands. Not gratitude, but accountability. It was small but significant. I texted Regina Hold, the sheriff. "Let's see if he means it." Then I called Lydia. I received it. She exhaled in relief. "What will you do?" she asked. I paused. "I'm listening," I answered. By day 12, the house was stirring again. My parents hired a landscaper, patched the grout, bought new smoke alarms, and even hired a cleaner to scrub the countertops I'd once bought for them. They showed up on my porch with a small potted fern, Mom's apology gift, she called it. Dad stood beside her, head bowed. I felt the old tension knot in my gut then loosen. I invited them in for coffee. Inside, I pointed to the repaired grout and replaced alarm. "You did this," I said. "You noticed." Dad nodded, eyes misting. Mom reached for my hand. Lydia slipped into the doorway, watching. We sat around my kitchen island, no salmon, no cheesecake, just mugs of steaming brew. The silence was comfortable. I realized then that my withdrawal had been a mirror reflecting their neglect. By stepping back, I allowed them to step up. Respect can be regained, but only if earned. I didn't know where this would lead, but for the first time we were talking as equals, not as debtor and creditor. The house on Maple Street would no longer be my burden, but theirs, just as it always had been when built on my sweat and savings. And as I sipped my coffee, I felt a cautious hope that this chapter would close not with eviction, but with understanding. In the weeks after that fragile reconciliation, I began to sense how quickly old patterns could resurface when comfort replaced confrontation, and habits of deference crept back in like ivy around a fence. I'd invited them to stay in the Maple Street house while they sorted out finances, but I made it clear that from now on, bills were due on the first and only the first. That maintenance wasn't my obligation, but theirs. That respect was non-negotiable. At first, they complied. Lydia paid the power bill on time. Mom scheduled seasonal gutter cleaning, and Dad even started researching refinancing options with an eye toward maintaining equity rather than bleeding the place dry. But one crisp morning, 3 weeks into our new arrangement, a familiar pang of betrayal hit. I'd left my laptop open in my cafe-style office running code tests on a deadline. When I returned, I discovered an email to my attorney drafted in Dad's voice, requesting the reversal of our agreement, claiming I'd coerced them into paying exorbitant fees and accusing me of creating undue hardship by enforcing deadlines. My heart dropped into my shoes. This wasn't misunderstanding or denial. It was the same old impulse to turn my generosity against me. I stared at the screen, numb with disbelief, reread his fabricated recounting of events, and realized that no policy change, no gentle request could rewrite years of entitlement overnight. I forwarded the draft to Regina with a single line, "He's back to gaslighting. Advise." She replied within minutes, "Document everything. No more verbal agreements." I closed the email and exhaled a breath I didn't know I was holding. Confrontation loomed larger than ever. That afternoon, I drove to the house under a leaden sky, my mind buzzing with equal parts anger and sorrow. Lydia met me at the door, her expression sheepish. "Dad blamed me," she said softly, circling her index finger through her coffee mug's handle. "He made it sound like you're trying to take advantage, like you're punishing them." I swallowed the tight knot in my throat. "Ask him to send it officially," I said. "No more whispers or indirect threats." She nodded, tears shining. I felt her guilt. She'd always been his unwitting messenger. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood and stale varnish. In the kitchen, Mom hovered over the stove, feeding logs into the fireplace, her back turned. I cleared my throat. "I saw the email draft," I said calmly. She turned face pale. I didn't know she whispered, voice cracking. "I thought it was his idea. I thought you wanted more paperwork." I shook my head. "I want accountability, not paperwork. I want respect, not manipulation." My words hung between us, harsher than I intended, but true. Dad appeared in the hallway, shoulders slumped, eyes avoiding mine. "I sent it," he admitted, voice taut. I was scared. Scared of what I wondered losing control. Losing face? "I thought if I could freeze us back in old roles, you'd relent," he said. I looked at him and saw the frightened man behind the patriarch, desperate to cling to a fantasy of authority he never earned. "That's not how trust works," I replied. "You can't build a future by rewriting the past." The silence afterward felt profound, as if the house itself was waiting for an answer. Then Lydia spoke. "Maybe we should have gone to therapy," she suggested, voice small. It was the first time any of us had said the word aloud. Dad's shoulders jerked. "What good would that do?" he muttered. My heart softened. Despite my anger, I'd thought the same thing until recently. It could help us understand why we keep circling the same dead end, I said. Why we sabotage the very thing we need most: connection. Mom approached, tears staining her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she said simply, and it was the most potent apology I'd heard from her in decades. I exhaled, letting a fraction of the tension slip away. "Let's call someone," I agreed. "One session." Dad looked between us, conflict etched into his face. Finally, he met my eyes and nodded once sharply, like a man making an impossible concession. We stood in the kitchen, 3 adults who had survived each other's worst, and for the first time stood willing to face the work ahead. As I left that evening, the sun was dipping behind the trees, painting golden slashes across the windows. I didn't know if therapy would fix everything or if we'd break again, but I felt something shift inside me, the knowledge that healthy boundaries and honest conversations would always require more courage than silent sabotage. And as I drove away, I realized that real family wasn't built on unpaid debts or unspoken sacrifices. It was forged in the hard, honest moments when we chose to address our wounds instead of watering them with resentment. Therapy began with shaky steps. A small rented conference room, neutral furniture, a round table that held our collective histories. Dr. Emerson greeted us with quiet eyes and gentle questions. "What brings you here now?" she asked. Dad looked at me, then at Mom, then back at me. He said, "We want to fix our family." His voice wavered. Lydia nodded, clutching her coffee. I shifted in my chair. I want respect, I said. I want to feel seen. Silence settled before Mom whispered, "We've taken you for granted." And just like that, mask slipped. In that room, we unearthed old wounds, the sting of Dad's dismissals, the weight of Mom's unspoken expectations, Lydia's quiet envy hidden behind laughter. I spoke of late-night coding sessions fueled by hope and fear. Dad admitted he belittled me because he was ashamed he couldn't protect me. Mom confessed she overcompensated with gifts to hide her disappointment. Lydia offered that she'd used my failures to deflect her own insecurities. We cried. We shook our heads. We touched each other's hands, tentatively bridging years of distance. Outside therapy, small actions carried big meaning. Dad fetched my dry cleaning without commentary. Mom left my favorite tea on the counter. Lydia sent a genuine text, "I'm proud of you." They both called when I had a big presentation, not out of obligation, but with genuine warmth. I noticed the difference their words matched their actions. Yet beneath these changes lurked unease. Old habits die slowly. One evening, I arrived at the house to find Mom in my home office sorting through my notebooks. She startled and apologized. I just thought maybe there was a clue I missed. I smiled softly. "My life isn't a puzzle to solve," I said. "I'll tell you if I want to share." The real test came when Dad proposed a family investment. He'd found a fixer-upper across town and wanted my help with the down payment. Memories of being drained flared inside me. I paused, weighing the moment. He met my eyes, vulnerability spilling through. "I'd like us to build something together," he said. In therapy, Dr. Emerson reminded us that relationships grow on trust, not transactions. I exhaled and laid down a condition: I'll support the project if we draft a clear agreement, roles, responsibilities, exit clauses. Dad nodded without argument. It was the first financial conversation without hidden agendas. A month later, blueprints lay spread on my kitchen table. We planned renovations over coffee, debating tile colors and room layouts. Lydia sketched ideas for an Airbnb suite. Mom researched local permits, surprised by how absorbed she felt. I drafted budgets in real time. There was laughter, there was collaboration, there was respect. In those moments, I felt something I hadn't in years: true partnership. When Dad looked up and said, "Thank you, son," his eyes glistened. I nodded, breaking a smile I didn't know I had in me. But the climax came unexpectedly. One evening, as we celebrated the signed permit, a notification blinked on my phone, a message from the county our new project was flagged. Someone had filed an anonymous complaint about zoning violations, accusing us of misusing a residential property for commercial gain. Panic fluttered through my chest. Lydia's face paled. Dad clenched his jaw. "Who would do this?" Mom's voice trembled. We turned to each other. In that instant, we realized growth always invites resistance. Together, we would face this last betrayal united rather than divided. And as we huddled in my living room, the four of us, I knew this was the true test, not that I could reclaim my power, but that we could rebuild family from its own ashes. The zoning complaint arrived on a Thursday afternoon in the same email thread where we'd last congratulated each other on the signed permit. I watched the notification appear. Anonymous complaint filed, possible commercial use violation, and felt a familiar tension coil in my chest. But this time it didn't snap me back into defensive retreat. Instead, I closed my eyes, pictured the past months of honest conversation around my kitchen table, and exhaled into resolve. I called Dad first. He answered on the second ring, voice taut. I read him the notice's language without accusation, then asked, "What does it look like to you?" He paused, then said quietly, "It's someone afraid of our change." Lydia picked up next. Her immediate response was anger at an unseen saboteur. But when I reminded her how we learned to address conflict, Listen first, she admitted she'd jumped to judgment. Mom's voicemail followed. "I'm sorry this is happening," she said. "I know it's not fair." Without prompting, she added, "We'll face it together." That evening, we convened in the living room beneath the soft glow of the reading lamp. The blueprints lay folded on the coffee table untouched. I proposed a plan meet with the planning department, lay out the scope of our project, invite neighbors to an open house tour, demonstrate our compliance and goodwill. Dad offered to draft the explanation letter. Lydia volunteered to design informational flyers. Mom agreed to bake treats for the neighbors, something warm, she said, like fresh-baked apologies. I felt an unfamiliar tightness at my throat, pride in our collective choice to turn suspicion into opportunity for connection. We split tasks, set a timeline, and sealed our pact with a group text, one family, one front. Over the next week, we moved as a unit. Dad and I met with the city planner, laid out the scope of work, answered questions honestly. Our transparency defused concerns before they hardened into resistance. We hosted the neighborhood open house on a Saturday, the same ivy-covered entrance where I first met Lydia for that difficult talk. Moms from next door sipped lemonade and praised the restored porch. Kids ran through the yard where I'd once mowed their parents' lawns. Neighbors poked at the blueprints not in suspicion but in genuine interest. Lydia stood beside me explaining the kitchen redesign. Her voice was steady, confident. She'd found pride in our project rather than privilege. Dad hovered with a little banner. "Welcome, Maple Street, neighbors." His attempt at cheer both awkward and earnest. Mom passed brownies with a victimless smile, and I realized how far we'd come, 4 individuals with separate talents united by respect rather than drained by obligation. That night, we gathered back at my loft to celebrate. No formal ceremony, just pizza, delivered glasses of soda, the city lights flickering on above us like silent stars. We played soft music and shared stories. Dad recounted the first brick he laid when he was 19, long before he'd ever heard of me. Lydia told us about her first college exam. Mom confessed her fear she'd repeat her own mother's pattern of silent disappointment. I listened, holding each story like a precious artifact. And then I shared mine, the midnight code breakthroughs, the first purchase I made for their house, the nights I lay awake wondering if I'd ever be more than their punching bag. They listened without interruption, nodding as if hearing me for the first time. When I finished, Mom reached across and squeezed my hand. Dad rested a hand on my shoulder, and Lydia raised her slice of pizza in a warm toast. To Nolan, our brother, our partner, our equal. In the days that followed, the complaint quietly dissolved. The planning department sent a note, project approved. Thank you for your cooperation. No news was perfect news, but to us, it was confirmation of something deeper. When respect replaces entitlement, harmony follows. We resumed renovation work with renewed momentum. I wrote contracts outlining responsibilities. Dad applied for a home equity line in good faith. Lydia launched a mini design portfolio on social media. Mom organized monthly check-ins to monitor bills and progress. We built not just walls and rooms, but trust and accountability. Months later, standing barefoot in the barely furnished guest suite, its walls painted in Mom's chosen shade of soft sage, its floors reclaimed wood. I'd sourced. Dad slipped an arm around my shoulders. "I'm proud of you," he said simply, voice thick. I met his gaze and saw something I'd never seen before. Humility wrapped in genuine love. Mom emerged with 2 mugs of tea, gave me a rare full embrace, and whispered, "Thank you for teaching us how to be family." Lydia appeared at the doorway, framed by the morning light, and added, "I'm grateful to have you in my life." We fell into a comfortable silence. 4 people who had survived wounds and withdrawals, betrayals and boundaries, now finding each other in a new equilibrium. The house on Maple Street had become more than a property. It was a testament to our journey from resentment to reconciliation, from silent erosion to vocal restoration. I realized that revenge had never been my true goal. It was reclaiming my voice, my dignity, and my place in their hearts. As we sipped tea in that sunlit room, I understood that real justice isn't measured in evictions or shutoffs, but in the quiet moments of accountability and care that follow. And in that warm light, surrounded by the gentle hum of a home we were rebuilding together, I knew we had finally risen from the ashes like a phoenix reborn, stronger and wiser, united not by blood alone, but by choice. Story 2. My family thought I would care their children for free after they took a $3,000 trip without me. At 5 a.m., I departed, and when they learned, they contacted CPS. I'm Riley, a 22-year-old recent college graduate with a degree in finance, as far back as I can recall. After high school, I've hoped to go to a good college, get a good career, and move out. It should be easy enough, right? But life had other ideas. After graduating and earning my degree, I went back to my parents' house in a little Ohio town. Please understand that I admire Russell and Denise, my parents. They are amazing individuals who have put a lot of effort into creating a secure atmosphere for my sister Morgan and me. However, returning home wasn't precisely the goal I had been pursuing for the past 4 years. It was intended that I would live with them for a few months while I looked for a job and saved up enough cash to purchase a house of my own. It made sense. Free meals, no rent, and an opportunity to reorganize as I planned my next move. Even though it slightly wounded my pride, I assured myself that it was a reasonable choice. I worked as an analyst for Western Group, a mid-sized company that specialized in financial planning for small firms, and at first everything went well within a week. Although the salary wasn't great, it was steady and the perks were respectable. I felt like I had made a significant first step toward freedom when I got home that evening. Dad was watching TV in the living room while Mom was in the kitchen making dinner. I picked up a plate of food, took a seat at the table, and gave the update. I was hired. With happiness, I said. On Monday, I begin. I briefly believed they would be thrilled. I was hoping for some congrats, perhaps even a, "we're proud of you." Rather, they shared the expression parents give when they are ready to say something awful. Mom grinned broadly and lowered her fork. That's fantastic. Riley, really? We were certain you would discover something. Dad chimed in, but it was quick. We've been meaning to discuss something with you. I felt sick to my stomach. This was not going to work out well. Mom folded her hands on the table and moaned. When my arthritis worsens, your dad's hours at the car shop have been shortened and I've had to work fewer hours at the library. They are also discussing further layoffs. We could need some assistance with the bills, so I asked, well aware of the direction this was headed. I'm sorry, Mom said. Only till things settle down. There would be no rent or other expenses for you to pay. Simply said, managing the food and utilities has been more difficult. I gazed at my plate while I sat there. I made the decision to make occasional contributions to help pay for my personal expenditures once I got back. However, that exceeded my expectations. They were my parents, though. They weren't asking for much, and they had always been encouraging. I pretended to smile and responded, "Yeah, of course. The least I can do is this." In hindsight, I should have established boundaries at that point. However, guilt is a powerful feeling. Over the course of the following 6 months, a pattern emerged. I would get up, leave for work, return home, and collapse. I send a significant portion of my monthly salary to my parents to cover expenses like groceries and bills. Additionally, I took on small jobs they said they didn't have time for, such as fixing Dad's Excel sheets since he wasn't tech-savvy, or running errands for Mom when her arthritis flared up. Money wasn't the only factor. I had not expected to have to supply patience time or effort. I initially persuaded myself that it was only a short-term gesture, a little way to honor my parents who had always supported me. But as time passed, I became aware of small details. Mom would sigh deeply and add, "It must be nice to think about moving out when the rest of us are struggling to get by." If I said that I wanted to save money for my own apartment, Dad was no exception. "Some people have no idea how hard it is to make ends meet," he would add, shaking his head. Whenever I made a personal purchase like purchasing new work attire, it was more than simply guilt. It was a complete lack of gratitude for all that I had sacrificed. I couldn't afford to go, so my friends stopped asking me out. Every month, my savings account failed to expand, and my desire to see the city waned. The only thing my mother said when I informed her that I was thinking about taking a second job to help save money more quickly was, "Well, just don't let it interfere with what we need." That was just what we needed. Despite my best efforts, I was unable to maintain the stability of this home. However, I didn't think it was very malevolent. The guilt trips were persistent and subtle, like pouring water over a rock, yet they weren't rude or demanding. In the meantime, I started to feel trapped. I only intended to be there for 3 or 6 months, but the more I helped them, the more they seemed to depend on me. As my idea of freedom dwindled further, I kept paying the bills that kept coming in. But it was only temporary, I told myself. All I would have to do was save a bit more. I even began looking at apartments in the city, imagining what it would be like to live on my own. But life threw me another curveball before I could move forward. It was a late spring Friday night. I was looking forward to a quiet evening with Netflix and leftovers after returning from work. Dad was outside fiddling with the lawnmower while Mom was in the kitchen. Up until the doorbell rang, everything appeared to be normal. My older sister Morgan was standing there looking upset when I answered the door. Behind her was her husband Travis, carrying a bag. Like sugar-fueled tornadoes, their 2 kids, Milo, age 3, and Ava, age 5, ran around the yard. "Unexpected," Morgan remarked with a big, phony smile. Unsure of what to say, I stood there for a moment. Behind her, Travis appeared worn out from carrying a duffel bag and luggage. What's happening? After a while, I asked, moving aside, as Morgan strode by me as if she owned the space. "We need somewhere to stay for a short time." As she said, she started to go toward the living room. She let out a long sigh as she collapsed into the couch. It's difficult to pay the rent now that Travis's consulting job is over and my boutique sales have dropped. You are aware of the current situation. However, I didn't know you let things go so bad that you packed up your whole family and unexpectedly showed up at someone else's house. In the end, Travis walked through the door, his arms stuffed. He hardly made eye contact as he muttered, "Hey, Riley," before he moved the belongings upstairs. Mom came in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, and I was still standing there motionless. "My kids have arrived," she yelled while embracing Morgan. "Poor things, you've experienced a lot. Don't be concerned. Everything will be taken care of by us." A minute later, Dad came in with Milo in one arm like a football. As he sat down and headed right for the mower, he added, "This one almost gave me a heart attack," as if it were an amusement park ride. Morgan gave a little laugh. However, I saw that she didn't glance at Milo to warn him to stop, nor did she offer an apology. I felt as like I was in another dimension as I stood there and watched the drama unfold. In a matter of minutes, my parents were lauding Morgan as if she were a war hero who had made it through a significant battle. Dad volunteered to move his tools out of the extra room to make more room while Mom was already discussing dinner and where to put the children's beds. I remained invisible in the interim. I sat in my room that night attempting to concentrate on a work budget worksheet, but all I could hear was commotion. Ava and Milo hurried downstairs, shouting as loudly as they could up and down the hallway. As Morgan informed her mother about her recent business troubles, her voice echoed loudly across the living room. It would only be a few weeks, I told myself as I inhaled deeply. I should be able to handle that. It became evident the next morning that Morgan and Travis would not be departing anytime soon. They filled the closet in the spare room, emptied all the bags, and even occupied a cabinet shelf that held the food for the kids. I was also chosen to be the babysitter without making any overt statements. It began. In passing, little Morgan would beg me to watch Ava and Milo while she and Travis hurried to the grocery. "It will just take 1 hour," she would say, reaching for her handbag. But usually, that hour lasted 2 or 3. Weekends were the worst. On Saturday mornings, I would get up with the hopes of relaxing and watching Netflix or reading, only to see Morgan and Travis getting ready for the day. Morgan would bring me a list of kid-friendly activities she had printed off the internet and declare that we were going to have brunch with friends. We must not linger too long. Not for too long. The majority of the day was meant by her. When I attempted to push back the first time, Morgan pretended that I had just recommended throwing the kids in a ditch. It's only brunch, Riley. You have no intentions at all. What's so important? I had intended to catch up on work during the day. I gestured at my laptop. Morgan gave an eye roll. In any case, you're only seated in front of your computer. Can't you do it while Milo and Ava are present? It's really theatrical of you. Mom jumping in was the worst part. She murmured, dropping her voice as though to impart some ancient knowledge. Riley, honey. Because Morgan puts in so much effort, she deserves to take occasional breaks. I also put in a lot of work. Mom simply waved me away when I stated that. You do, of course. But dear, you're not dating anyone. You have no idea the amount of strain that comes with having a family to support. I didn't have a husband or kids to worry about, so it seemed like my personal issues didn't matter. It was always about how much tougher everyone else had, regardless of what I stated. If I pleaded for some space, it would be selfish of me to set boundaries. I was putting myself first. Additionally, Morgan and Travis would act as though they had just finished a marathon when they got back from their endless brunches or errands. Travis once sank into the sofa as though he had spent the day digging trenches rather than enjoying mimosas, saying, "You don't know what it's like out there." I wanted to yell. I have no idea what it's like. Ava had been asking for a snack every 5 minutes, and I had just spent 6 hours preventing Milo from eating Play-Doh. It would be too whiny, of course, to bring it up. While Ava insisted on snacks every 5 minutes, I spent my Saturdays watching Bluey and attempting to stop Milo from hurling blocks at me. During these long babysitting sessions, Mom and Dad conveniently disappeared, saying they had errands to do or things to do in the garage. Morgan rolled her eyes when I informed her later. They're only children, Riley. It's not that difficult. Not too hard. When she wasn't cleaning crayon marks off the walls or explaining why it's not a good idea to eat Play-Doh, it was easy for her to say. The fact that so few people appeared to value what I was doing was the worst part. Morgan pretended that I was exaggerating whenever I brought it up. Unless he needed anything, Travis seldom ever talked to me. Additionally, Mom and Dad appeared to believe that everything was simply normal. One evening, when I told Mom how tired I was, she responded, "You're such a huge help. It's an excellent preparation for when you eventually have children." The incessant guilt trips were becoming exhausting. Mom's remarks came to mind each time I considered saying no or establishing more firm boundaries. Family is helpful. Family, what about me? Shouldn't I have been allowed to live my own life? Nor was it only babysitting. With 5 new mouths to feed, my salary, which had previously covered the expenses of 3 people, was suddenly stretched thin. Overnight, the price of food and utilities skyrocketed. One night after supper, I tried to bring it up. "Would Travis and you be able to help out this week with groceries, Morgan?" She gave me the impression that I had asked her to give me her kidney. "Riley, we're already barely making ends meet. You are aware of that." Travis gave a focused nod. Right now, things are difficult. I was furious on the inside, but I bit my tongue and let it go. I began to feel like a prisoner in my own house as the weeks stretched into months. The only place I could hide was in my bedroom. Even so, it wasn't secure. It was enjoyable for Ava and Milo to burst in without warning and scatter toys and crumbs all over the place. I was the only one who understood that this was not a momentary situation. I was suffering emotionally and financially as a result of Morgan and Travis getting too comfortable. I felt like the bad person every time I spoke out, even if I should have done so sooner. I stayed silent, despite being told over and over again that I was being selfish or exaggerating. Everything changed when I overheard a talk one evening. I didn't mean to listen in, but it's hard to avoid overhearing discussions when you live with people who don't understand what an indoor voice is. One evening, I was in my room trying to escape the ruckus below by going through job advertisements, as I heard Mom's phone call come to an end. Yes, we will all be celebrating Celeste's retirement by traveling to Florida the next weekend. Having the entire family together for a proper send-off will be very pleasant, she remarked. Grinning, I went cold. Retirement festivities in Florida, the entire family. Craning my neck to check whether I had misheard, I got up and walked into the hallway. Mom was pacing the kitchen with her back to me while still on the phone. Riley will be present to watch the children, of course. It just makes sense. There's no use taking them to something they won't like. It was there, except then myself. The family would travel to Florida together. I had apparently previously volunteered to remain and watch the kids. I returned to my room wondering how they could have forgotten me. My anger increased as I gave it more attention. In addition to not telling me about the trip, they didn't even consider inviting me. I didn't receive any prior notification, wasn't asked if I could babysit, and wasn't invited. Since my family did that, they simply assumed. The days that followed were characterized by awkward quiet and frustration. While Ava and Milo were causing mayhem in the living room, Morgan was busy shopping for vacation attire and showing off her new bikini and flip-flops around the house. Travis talked about how excited he was to unwind on the beach all the time. In the meantime, Mom was busy organizing her trip and double-checking her packing list. Naturally, Dad concurred with whatever she said, nodding when needed, but contributing little more than a sporadic grunt of agreement. The fact that I wasn't going was not mentioned. One evening at dinner, I made an effort to gently bring it up. When did you guys intend to update me about Florida? I stabbed at my salad and asked. Mom gave me a startled look. Yes, I believed Morgan had informed you. Morgan didn't even raise her gaze from her dish. I thought you were aware. Mom has been discussing it for weeks. I wanted to yell. No one thought to talk to me for weeks. What is the plan then? I tried to look calm as I asked. I simply stay here with the kids while you all go to Florida. Yes, Mom said in a matter-of-fact manner. It's just the most logical choice. A retirement party wouldn't be fun for the kids, so someone would have to stay behind to watch them. Even if you're really nice with Ava and Milo, you wouldn't want to come. The final bit hurt. Why would I not want to attend? I asked, attempting to seem calm. Morgan glanced up slowly, her face a mix of indignation and sympathy. Riley, it's a family vacation. Only adults. Other than Aunt Celeste, you wouldn't even know anyone there. Furthermore, you're not very close to her. In an attempt to diffuse the situation, Dad added his voice. We just believed that this was the most advantageous arrangement for all parties. For a few days, the house will be yours alone. Calm and peaceful. Was he telling the truth? While the rest of the family enjoyed cocktails on the beach, how soothing would it be to spend the entire weekend watching two hyperactive kids? I then put a stop to the discussion. Nothing I said would alter the obvious fact that they had already made up their minds. I started to feel alienated from my own family as the days went by. There was a tangible sense of excitement throughout the house. Mom and Morgan were often discussing their plans, outfits, and the places they would be visiting in Florida. Travis, who seldom ever showed emotion other than minor wrath, seemed to be very looking forward to the vacation. I remained invisible in the interim. The trend, meanwhile, was not exclusive to the Florida getaway. When we were youngsters, Morgan was the life of the party. She served as the cheering captain, and banners and balloons were used to honor her achievements. Morgan's trophies were on the shelf, and her face was in every family portrait, so it didn't matter that I was the nerd. Nothing has changed in years. I remained an afterthought, and Morgan remained the golden kid. The person they relied on but never really understood, the one they contacted when they needed anything. I attempted to divert my attention by concentrating on my job, but it was difficult since Ava and Milo would frequently interrupt me or yell at one another about toys. Giving the kids an iPad and letting them run amok seems to be Morgan's approach to parenting. Travis's condition didn't improve significantly. As mayhem broke out all around him, he would sit on the couch and check his phone. However, when I heard Morgan and Mom conversing in the kitchen one day, things began to change. Riley is a pleasure to have around. She told me, without her watching the kids, I'm not sure what we would do. She holds everything together like glue. I treated them just like this. It's the glue that keeps their lives together, not a person with my own life and objectives. That's when I got it. I have to stop doing this. I couldn't keep giving up my independence and happiness for a family that didn't value me. I prepared my getaway for the remainder of the week. Retaliation wasn't the point. I wanted to take back my life. I could organize my own trip if they could do it without telling me. I tried to think of where I would go, but then I recalled that Brooke, one of my friends from university, had spoken about going camping that weekend. She had asked me to go with her and a couple of other people to Blue Ridge Falls. I turned down her offer because I thought I would be trapped watching the kids at home, but all of a sudden it seemed like a great chance. That evening, I sent Brooke a text. Is there space left for this weekend's trip? Her response came very immediately. Naturally, early on Saturday morning, we're heading off. Are you in? I took a moment to glance at my phone before answering. I'm on board. The choice felt freeing. This was no typical camping vacation, and I was at last prioritizing myself. It was a lifeline, an opportunity to leave the house and escape the turmoil that has taken over my life. It would be difficult to execute, though. My family was good at spotting things that didn't include them, so if they found out I was organizing anything for me, it was over before it started. This one required wisdom on my part. The days before Saturday were stressful. Morgan was wearing new beach hats and a playlist that she insisted on playing loudly while she paraded about the home in full holiday mode. Most of Travis's time was spent fiddling with the kids' car seats and griping about the amount of stuff they had to load into the trunk. In the meantime, Mom double-checked the packing list while hurrying about with a clipboard. Remember that Ava like her milk warmed before bed, Riley? As like I hadn't heard it 3 times already, she said. Milo is particular about his jammies too. Ascertain that he is among the blue ones. I bit my tongue to keep from saying something I would later regret, but I nodded. The point of arguing was lost. By Friday night, I had already offered to be the babysitter for the weekend, and nothing I said would make them reconsider. The house had a zoo-like appearance. Morgan and Mom were choosing what to bring. The kids were running about the living room like little hurricanes as Travis tried to fix a noisy luggage wheel. As usual, Dad had gone to the garage to see how the tools were doing, which I figured was code for escaping the chaos. While sipping my tea in silence and keeping track of the hours till morning, I observed everything from the kitchen. Everything began to settle down at 10 o'clock at night. Mom tucked the children into bed. As Travis settled down on the couch and browsed through his phone, Morgan walked upstairs to pack her final necessities. I went into my room and got my duffel bag after waiting until the house was utterly quiet. To avoid suspicion, I had been packed carefully all week, tucking my clothing and hiking boots at the back of my closet. I sealed it after carefully packing my flashlight, toothbrush, and some food. Instead of fear, my heart was pounding with excitement. It was more than simply a camping trip. Regaining control over my life was the goal. At 5 a.m., my alarm went off. Sharp. I climbed out of bed, picked up my duffel bag, and walked carefully to the door. It was quite silent in the home. It's the kind of silence that only comes in the early morning. The front door creaked more than I had anticipated, so I held my breath when I opened it. For a brief while, I hesitated, expecting someone to shout after me, but nothing happened. It was chilly and invigorating outside. Before I got into my car and turned on the ignition, I gave the darkened home one more glance. Relaxation washed over me as I pulled out of the driveway. I had freedom. The trip to Blue Ridge Falls was lovely and serene, but I felt lighter the further I went from home. For the first time in what felt like months, I switched on the radio and unwinded. But I couldn't stop wondering how my family would respond when they woke up. I made an effort to divert my attention and concentrate just on myself. The sun had already risen when I got at the campsite, which Brooke had texted me. She was already there, putting up her tent and emptying her car. "You made it." As I parked next to her, she shouted and waved. Naturally, I answered. Without a doubt, I would not miss it. The campground was not too far away for us to locate a decent road, yet it was still remote enough to feel like a true getaway. I was introduced to the rest of the group by Brooke, including her workplace and college friends. Few questions were asked, and everyone appeared friendly and at ease. In the morning, we set up tents, collected firewood, and decided which trails to pursue. We were far into the woods by noon. Being surrounded by nature was strange. Rather than yelling kids and making requests all the time, I got into a comfortable pace with Brooke, and we spoke about life, work, and everything else. I didn't answer, and she didn't ask about my family. They weren't the purpose of this trip. It has to do with me. We sat around the campfire that night to share stories and eat marshmallows. As I settled into my camp chair and basked in the fire's warmth, I remarked, "This is just what I needed." Brooke added another log to the fire and said, "Same. We ought to do this more frequently. Simply leave all you know behind." I looked at the flames and nodded. I felt totally at ease for the first time in a long time. No one pleaded with me for favors. I was not being guilt-tripped by anyone. No one requested that I give up my time and effort for their gain. I laughed more than I had in a long time as the evening wore on. It went beyond the tales and jokes. It was the sensation of having people all around me who didn't expect anything from me. I didn't look at my phone once during this period. When we arrived back at the campground that night after our trip, I was exhausted in the best conceivable manner. My legs ached. My heart felt lighter than it has in months, and my face was tanned. Regular requests and expectations from my family no longer worried me. I was thinking about my goals, my destination, and my means of getting there. Until I opened the front door, that is. The home was in disarray. On the couch were crayons, toy dinosaurs, and what seemed to be an empty cereal bag. I could hear voices coming from the living room, and there was a little scent of something burning. Mom said, "Riley's here," in a less friendly tone than normal. It sounded harsh, like though she were about to hurt me with something. I went into the living room, leaving my duffel bag outside the door. Dad, Travis, Morgan, and Mom were all seated together. Their angry cheeks reddened. Milo was curled up on the floor with a juice box in his hands, while Ava was wailing loudly. "What's happening?" I asked, attempting to seem calm. "What's happening?" Morgan murmured, getting to his feet and gesturing toward me. "You vanished without informing anyone. That's the situation. I promised not to babysit this weekend." I crossed my arms in response. "What the devil were you doing, and where were you going?" "You didn't tell us." Mom flushed and yelled. "I am an adult. Checking in is not necessary." With waning patience, I said, "We were alarmed to learn that you were not present with the children." According to Travis, the word panic does not adequately describe it. When they learned I wasn't home on Saturday morning, they claimed to be taken aback. I had lost my automobile. I had left no notes, and my room was deserted. They instantly assumed the worst, rather than presuming I had gone elsewhere or taken a much-needed break. Mom responded, trembling. "We thought something had happened to you. We even gave CPS a call." I was halted in my tracks by it. "You gave CPS a call. For what purpose? For leaving the children behind." Morgan sobbed as though it were the world's most obvious thing. I started by interrupting her with a wave of my hand. "I didn't agree to look after your children this weekend. I wasn't consulted when you guys made that decision. Second, it's crazy to blame me for not being here by phoning CPS. What did you tell them specifically?" "Hello, we wanted to leave our own children with someone who refused to let us. She's not at home anymore, though. Thus kindly take her into custody." "Before or after they hung up on you, did they laugh?" "That's crazy. When we didn't know where you were, it wasn't crazy," Mom cried out. I had had enough of their stupidity. What transpired then when CPS arrived after we told them everything? They departed. Morgan spoke quietly. "But how embarrassing was that, do you know?" "Feeling embarrassed?" I asked, raising my voice. I didn't stay to watch your kids, and you're afraid of seeming foolish, so concentrate at work, but weekend worry kept getting in the way. My coworkers could sense that something was off, but I had no intention of bringing up my family's problems in the middle of the break room. I was prepared for round 2 by the time I arrived home that evening. As soon as I walked into the kitchen, Mom was there to greet me. She folded her arms and said, "We need to talk." I'm worn out. I tried to pass Riley as I instructed her. She pushed in front of me and shouted that strongly, "This cannot wait." With a frown, I put my bags down. Now, what Mom's voice was harsh, but her expression softened. "Your sister is in pain. She believes you left her when she most needed you." I stared at her in confusion. I was necessary to her. For what purpose to watch her children while she took a holiday? "Mom, I'm not responsible for it. As a member of this family, you should fulfill your responsibilities." Her voice was filled with agony as she spoke. It's funny that only I can relate to it. I made a remark. At what point did Morgan assist me? When did someone assist me? Mom was about to reply, but she didn't say anything. That's right. In response, I packed my bag and went upstairs. The days that followed were stressful. Morgan didn't talk to me very much, and when she did, she merely said passive-aggressively that it's hard to find competent babysitters these days. Travis avoided getting involved, which was probably for the best, but his quiet was almost as disagreeable as the argument. Despite their best efforts to pretend nothing had occurred, Mom and Dad were filled with sorrow in every interaction. "We are a family." At random, Mom would remark, as though it was the answer to every problem. I knew that I could not stay much longer. No amount of time or space could make the home feel any less oppressive than it did. Dad came on my door one evening when I was folding clothes. "Can we have a conversation?" His voice was softer than normal as he inquired. "Yes," I replied. He sat on the side of my bed and stared down at his hands, even though I didn't want to listen to another lecture. "Look, I understand that you feel like we haven't treated you fairly, and I realize that things have been difficult recently." I remained quiet, awaiting his next move. "However, your mother and I are only attempting to maintain everyone's unity. This family has gone through a lot, I was informed, and we're all doing our best." "I get it, Dad." "I can't keep sacrificing my life for everyone else," I remarked, trying to seem calm. "I'm 22. Instead, than cleaning up after Morgan and Travis, I should be focusing on my future." I could tell he wasn't fully understanding, but he nodded slowly. After a long pause, he continued, "We'll work this out. Give it some time, please." I nodded, but I knew in my heart that this would not get better with time. I had decided by the end of the week. It was time to go. The home seemed more like a battle than a place to call home. I was aware that staying too long might cause me to lose what little sanity I still had. After months of paying expenses that weren't mine, I started looking for flats. Even though I didn't have much saved, it was enough to get me started. A few of the postings I came across seemed intriguing. Just neat and orderly, nothing special. I took a quick peek at my phone before calling Aunt Celeste. The second ring caught her attention. "How are you, Riley, my love?" she asked. Her voice was kind and understanding. "Hey, Aunt Celeste, I suppose I'm all right." Unsure of how to begin this conversation, I replied. She immediately sensed the hesitancy in my tone. "What's happening? Is everything okay?" "Not really," I said. "I didn't attend your retirement vacation. I'm not sure whether you heard." "I noticed," she said. "According to your mother, you were staying behind to assist with the children. That sounded strange to me. Why did you not attend?" No one informed me about it, so I couldn't help but chuckle sourly. As usual, they simply expected I would babysit. And after a period of silence, Celeste took a sharp inhale. "Unfortunately, I'm not surprised by it. It seems like they've been taking advantage of you, even though your mom said you've been helping out a lot." "You might say that indeed," I replied. "Actually, I'm considering moving out, but I'm not sure how I'll deal with the consequences." "You've done more than enough, my dear. You're still young. You shouldn't be restrained in this manner. Get out. Establish limits and let them clean up their own mess. You don't have to do all the repairs for them." It felt like a weight was lifted off my chest when I heard those words, she continued firmly. And tell me if you need assistance. It was awfully quiet. Mom's mouth fell open as Morgan's fork clattered on her plate. Even Dad was taken aback, but he immediately responded with his typical smile. What are you? Mom's voice trembled as she asked. I'm leaving, I said it again. By the end of the weekend, I'll be departing, and I've already found a place. You can't just walk away, though. Mom's voice rose as she spoke. You must be here. The children, the bills. I clarified that it was not my duty. For months, I've been putting my life on hold, taking care of Morgan's children and paying for this place. I need to live my own life now. Morgan laughed. Whoa, are you just going to leave us? How self-centered are you? I looked over at her. My patients are exhausted. Selfish. Morgan, rent-free housing has been yours. Dumping your children on me whenever possible while making no contribution at all. You are the most selfish person there is. That's sufficient. Riley. Seriously, Dad said. I said no, it's not enough. I've fulfilled all of your requests, and all I've received in return is disdain, guilt, and trips. I'm finished. I was not bothered by Mom's face crumpling. I informed the landlord that I would no longer be making rent payments. Therefore, you'll also need to find that out. Morgan seemed ready to explode. Do you mean me? Will you simply abandon us with all the bills? Without you, how are we going to manage? Not my problem, I responded, repeating what she had said months earlier. I loaded up my car with the last of my possessions the next morning. Mom didn't say anything as she stood on the porch looking dejected. Dad avoided the whole event by staying inside. Morgan didn't even down the steps. I had a range of feelings as I pulled out of the driveway, but all in all, I felt free. My new apartment seemed unreal for the first 2 days. My mother phoned many times, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to face her just yet. Morgan accused me of deserting the family in many irate smirks that he wrote to me. Celeste phoned to check in after I blocked her phone number. She said, "Sweetheart, I'm proud of you. Standing up for oneself is difficult, especially when family is involved. However, you made the correct decision." Thank you, Aunt Celeste. I grinned. I also believe so. After several months, things are beginning to return to normal. I've reconnected with old pals, taken up new hobbies, and even began accumulating money for a trip to Europe the following year. I have avoided contact with my family. Even though Mom still occasionally texts me with guilt-inducing content, I no longer allow it to affect me. Since I left Morgan and I haven't spoken, and I'm okay with that. I am aware that things must change, but I am no longer in charge of it. I've lived long enough prioritizing them. For once, I need to put myself first. And what do you know? I have no regrets.